I didn't move to New Mexico to pick fights. I moved to disappear. After 20 years of city life, where walls were thin, hallways echoed with angry neighbors, and every step felt scrutinized, I was done. I'd worked as a technician for most of my adult life, climbing turbines, fixing industrial pumps, crawling into tight metal coffins full of burnt-out wires and scorched insulation. It paid well, sure, but the grind of alarms and machines and never-ending traffic stripped away more of my peace every year. So when I found a listing for 5 acres in Sagebrush Hollow, I jumped on it faster than a loose bolt on a shaky ladder. No mortgage, no lease, no shared walls, no HOA, just my land. The property sat on the edge of the high desert, with nothing but endless horizon on 3 sides and one neighboring development to the east, Oak Ridge Heights. The place was so manicured it looked fake, all beige, all brick, every house spaced with surgical precision. The lawns were the same, the mailboxes clones, and the HOA documents thicker than my truck manual. Still, I figured I'd be far enough from their reach to do my thing. The house on my parcel was old ranch style, solid bones, red tin roof weathered to a dull copper. The barn leaned slightly but still stood proud against the wind. The fencing needed work, the well pump wheezed, and the back pasture had more goat heads than grass. But none of that mattered. This place had silence, and for the first time in years, I could breathe without someone's rules clogging the air. That was until the mailbox war started. It happened on a Thursday. I remember because it was the day I'd finally fixed the south fence line. I'd spent the morning setting new posts in the rocky clay, sweating through my shirt, humming to myself as the sun climbed high and the air got thick with heat. By noon, I was back at the barn, prepping lumber for the goat pen when the sound hit me, metal crunching, tires squealing, and a deep thud that echoed off the hills. I dropped the hammer and ran. By the time I rounded the front gate, the scene looked like a war zone for small furniture. My mailbox, a standard aluminum one I'd installed just 3 weeks before, lay flat and smashed and twisted like it had been caught in a tornado and then run over for good measure. Mail littered the dirt road like confetti at a retirement party. Tire tracks dug into the loose gravel, curving off the path and kicking back toward Oak Ridge Heights. No car. No note. No apology. Just a twisted pole and the kind of silence that feels more ominous than peaceful. I stood there, hands on hips, more confused than angry. My first thought? A drunk driver. Maybe a teenager joyriding or someone unfamiliar with the narrow road. It happens, especially in rural areas. I'd seen worse in Albuquerque on a Tuesday night. The nearest neighbor was half a mile away. Number. One saw anything. That afternoon, I cleaned up the mess, muttering to myself, but trying not to stew. Accidents happen, right? I drove into town, picked up another box, dug out the old concrete footing, and poured a new one. By dusk, it was upright again, looking exactly like the old one. I even laughed about it when I cracked open a beer on the porch. If this was the worst thing to happen out here, I'd still come out ahead. But that wasn't the end. Not even close. 7 days later, almost to the hour, it happened again. Same crunch. Same screech. Same ominous silence. I was inside this time, eating a sandwich at the kitchen counter when I heard the crash. My stomach sank before I even reached the front window. By the time I stepped outside, the scene was identical to the last. Mail everywhere. The pole bent backward like a tree in a storm, tire tracks curling back toward Oak Ridge Heights. My sandwich hit the ground. Now I was angry. 2 incidents in 1 week? On the same day? Same time? That wasn't bad luck. That was a message. And suddenly, I remembered the glances I'd been getting in town-side eyes at the hardware store, curious nods at the feed supply. Maybe not everyone loved that the new guy was building fences without permits or letting. Weeds grow a little longer than suburbia allowed. That night, I didn't drink on the porch. I sat inside and thought. The lights stayed off. My fingers hovered over my laptop keyboard as I Googled Oak Ridge Heights HOA for the first time. The next day, I drove to a sporting goods store and bought a $50 trail camera. Simple setup. Motion activated. Infrared. Hunters use them too. Track deer. I'd use mine to track mailbox assassins. I mounted it discreetly on a fence post about 15 feet from the mailbox. It had a clear view of the gravel road, the box, and the bend that led toward Oak Ridge Heights. I angled it just enough to avoid glare and tested the feed on my laptop. Crystal clear. I even smiled. Mailbox number 3 went up that afternoon, same design, but this time I bolted it twice as deep into the footing. Let them try. And I waited. All week. I checked the camera every evening like clockwork. No movement. Nothing out of the ordinary. A few jackrabbits. One UPS truck. A hawk. Until Saturday morning. I didn't hear the crash this time. I was out back replacing the hinges on the barn door. The sun was already high, and the day felt calm, normal. Too normal. It wasn't until I walked up the front path to grab a fresh water bottle that I saw it. Mailbox number 3 had been murdered. Again, the same signs. Crumpled metal. Concrete split at the base. Tire marks, fresh ones, dragging back toward the HOA gates. But this time I wasn't just a confused victim. I had eyes. I grabbed the trail cam, plugged it into my laptop inside, and fast-forwarded through the last 12 hours of footage. Most of it was uneventful. A stray dog. A dusty breeze. Then I saw it. At exactly 8:47 a.m. A white BMW sedan approached from the east. It slowed slightly, then accelerated, not swerving, not by mistake, but with purpose, and smashed into the T. Mailbox. The footage jolted as the camera caught the impact. The car rocked back, paused. Then she reversed, backed up 20 feet, and slammed it again. Harder. The driver stepped out casually, wearing a navy blazer and slacks, as if on her way to church or a business brunch. Short gray hair, sunglasses, clipboard. She inspected the wreckage like a field general surveying damage from a successful strike. And then, with a satisfied nod, she got back into her BMW and drove off. Back toward Oak Ridge Heights. I froze the frame. Zoomed in. Enhancing didn't do much, but I got a perfect shot of her face. A woman in her early 40s, eyes like sharpened. Glass. Confident. Smug. My hand shook as I clicked through the HOA website. It didn't take long. There she was. Cynthia Greaves, HOA President, 3 consecutive terms. Former police logistics coordinator. Advocate for preserving Oak Ridge Heights' pristine environment. I stared at the picture, then back at the footage. Same woman. I leaned back in my chair. Staring at the screen, I felt something shift. Not fear, not disbelief. Something colder. Resolve. Because this wasn't over. This had just begun. The next morning, I drove into Oak Ridge Heights. The contrast hit me like a punch. Perfectly trimmed hedges, roses blooming in rigid symmetry, pastel-colored garages that looked cloned. It was Stepford perfection, suffocating, plastic, unreal. I rolled through slowly, windows down. Camera on the dashboard recording. Cynthia Greaves lived in a corner house, 2 stories, ivory brick, with a bright red door and matching planters. I parked just outside the curb, technically public land, and stepped out. Every move was calculated. Calm. She was watering plants in her yard. Wearing gloves. Humming. When she saw me, the song stopped. Miss Greaves, I said, holding the photo still from my trail cam footage. Care to explain why you rammed my mailbox twice? She didn't blink, didn't even look at the picture. You're not a member of our HOA. You don't belong on that road. That mailbox is an eyesore. That's not your call. It's county road, public easement. Not anymore. We voted to maintain that stretch under HOA standards. You voted to take over a public road? Our bylaws grant us certain maintenance jurisdictions, and we filed for annexation. You'll find you're in violation of several ordinances already. Your fencing is non-compliant. Your mailbox is too close to the curb. I took a breath. You know what's also a violation? Vehicular destruction of private property. I've got footage, clear as day. You want to escalate this? Her eyes narrowed. She leaned closer, voice lowering. Do you know how many people move out of Sagebrush Hollow after their first year? You're already on thin ice. You don't want to make yourself unwelcome. You already did that for me. I turned and walked back to the truck, her icy gaze burning into my back. Sheriff Redden was a stocky man with a thick mustache and a pair of mirrored aviators. He probably hadn't taken off since 1984. His office was a metal building tucked between a feed store and a vape shop. He listened, arms crossed, while I explained everything: the mailbox attacks, the footage, the confrontation. When I slid over the USB stick, he plugged it in without a word. Footage played. The BMW, the crash, the smug inspection. Well, he finally said, leaning back in his chair. That's about as clear as it gets. So you'll charge her? He scratched his chin. Might not be that simple. How? Technically, that stretch of road's still county, but Oak Ridge Heights has a pending claim for maintenance. Control. They're well funded. And Cynthia, she donates to a lot of local campaigns. I stared at him. Are you telling me she's above the law? He didn't answer. Just pulled off his glasses and sighed. I'm telling you this town's small, and things don't always get handled the way they do in Albuquerque. Then handle it the way it should be. I'll file an incident report, he said. But if I were you, I'd replace that mailbox and let this go. Folks out here don't take kindly to noise. I left the USB drive with him, but I made a copy for myself. The letter arrived 3 days later. Official Oak Ridge Heights stationery. Thick parchment. Stamped. The tone was clinical, the message lethal. Greater than Dear Mr. Reed, as a result of your recent violations, including illegal mailbox placement, fence line encroachment, and unapproved outbuilding modifications. You are hereby notified of intent to pursue civil penalties unless immediate remediation occurs. Furthermore, your recent threatening behavior toward Board President Cynthia Greaves has been documented. You are advised to refrain from further contact. Sincerely, Oak Ridge Heights Homeowners Association Legal Division. I read it twice. Then again, I wasn't even in their neighborhood. My fence was over 200 yards from their nearest lot. My barn had stood for decades. My mailbox was the only thing close to that damned HOA line, and it was on county right-of-way. This was a shot across the bow. Cynthia wasn't just threatening me with bricks and bumpers anymore. She was trying to bury me in paper, but they underestimated one thing. I don't scare easy. And I sure as hell don't roll over. That weekend, I went to the farmer's market. Not to shop, but to talk. I printed stills from the trail cam footage and posted them on a small bulletin board next to the community kiosk. I handed a few to the guy selling tomatoes. He lived 2 doors down from Cynthia and casually struck up a conversation. Ever notice how the HOA handles things? I asked, like with the guy who painted his shed too red? Or the one who got fined for having a flag? He chuckled. Cynthia'll slap you with a $500 citation if your dog barks too long. Guess she's expanding her authority, I said, showing the image of her car mid-impact with my mailbox. His smile dropped. Within the hour, word spread. A woman whose son was fined for skateboarding stopped me. Another man, quiet, older, who'd been trying to add solar panels, told me they lost his permits 3 times. A couple who moved from Texas said they felt watched every time they stepped outside. The stories came out in hushed tones, sideways glances. No one wanted to say it too loudly, but everyone was fed up. Cynthia wasn't protecting the neighborhood. She was controlling it. And now she was spilling that control beyond the gates. By Sunday, my mailbox footage had made its way into over a dozen inboxes. On Monday morning, I found a citation zip-tied to my gate. Violation: unsecured livestock. Fence visible from residential zone. Fine: $750. There was no animal in sight. 2 hours later, county zoning called to say they'd received a complaint about an unregistered dwelling on my land. Someone had submitted a photo of my barn, claiming it had been converted into an illegal rental. Then the drone came. It buzzed overhead while I was checking the water tank's leak. Black, silent, except for the hum of its rotors. It hovered for a full 5 minutes before zipping back east toward the HOA. The next day, animal control showed up, saying someone had reported neglected goats. I didn't even have goats yet. Just cleared the pen for them. By now, it wasn't just petty. It was warfare, psychological, legal, surveillance. The pressure was building. My mail wasn't showing up. My deliveries were delayed. One of my driveway reflectors was ripped clean out of the ground and thrown in the ditch. Cynthia was tightening the noose. But what she didn't know, I had friends too, and one of them was about to get very interested in Sagebrush Hollow, because the moment I mentioned interstate wire fraud and property manipulation tactics to an old buddy at the Bureau, things started moving. The Bureau doesn't move fast unless there's a reason. But when I forwarded everything, photos, citations, harassment logs, and that HOA financial document I'd quietly received from a disillusioned board member, it changed everything. File included invoices for a security monitoring contract with an Arizona shell company. Guess what? That company didn't exist on any legitimate registry, but the money, thousands in monthly transfers, did. Untraceable once it left the HOA account. My friend, Agent Morales, flagged it immediately. "Clayton," he said over the phone, "this isn't just about mailbox vandalism. This is systemic abuse of power, probable wire fraud, mail tampering, and local law enforcement collusion. We're opening a formal case." I don't remember the last time I smiled that hard. 2 days later, a federal subpoena landed on Cynthia Greaves' doorstep. And suddenly, Oak Ridge Heights wasn't so quiet anymore. By midweek, rumors swept the neighborhood like a desert storm. First, the HOA board meeting was abruptly canceled. Then came the whispers Cynthia's office was being audited, her phone confiscated, her personal assistant gone overnight. Some said the FBI showed up at her house at 6 a.m. One woman swore she saw her crying behind the curtain. The community, once terrified of her, began stepping into the light. The couple with the solar panels? They spoke to a reporter from the Albuquerque Tribune. A man whose grandmother was fined for growing native corn plants in her front yard posted his story online. It went viral overnight. Dozens of homeowners came forward with accusations, forged violations, unauthorized surveillance, and illegal towing schemes. Even the sheriff who shrugged me off? Gone. Placed on administrative leave. Cynthia tried to fight back, claimed she was the victim of a smear campaign. But it was too late. The perfect HOA queen had cracked. And the whole kingdom was falling with her. I'll never forget the Saturday. The neighbors came to me. At first, it was just the tomato seller, Jim. Then that couple from Texas. Then more. They showed up one by one, parking in the gravel lot by my barn, bringing coffee, folding chairs, even baked pies. We didn't need a town hall. My barn became one. One man, Doug, a former HOA treasurer, stood up and said, "I saw the budget change. I just didn't know how deep it went." A young mother, Marissa, said she was once fined for using cloth diapers on her clothesline. She said it was unsightly. She teared up. I didn't say anything. I wish I had. We created a new group, Residents for HOA Accountability. We made signs, flyers, created a fund for legal costs. Our mission was simple: strip Cynthia of control, reclaim the HOA bylaws, and ensure no one ever got bullied again. And guess who got elected interim president? Me. When the feds returned, they didn't knock. They marched up that perfect red brick path with a warrant in hand, a dozen agents deep. Neighbors peeked through curtains as Cynthia Greaves was escorted out in handcuffs, wearing a silk robe and rage in her eyes. The charges were long: mail tampering, criminal mischief, wire fraud, unlawful surveillance, racketeering through a nonprofit HOA. Turns out she had embezzled nearly $320,000 over 4 years, funneling money through the Arizona shell and pocketing kickbacks for code enforcement patrols that never existed. They also found illegally recorded conversations from her smart home system neighbors she secretly spied on during board meetings and private complaints. As she was led to the black SUV, she caught my eye. "You'll regret this," she hissed. "I just tipped my hat." "Already don't." The whole town watched her go. And for the first time in years, Sagebrush Hollow felt clean. 3 months later, the ranch was quiet again. My new mailbox stood tall, fortified steel, painted with the words, "Try again." The HOA bylaws had been rewritten, stripping excessive powers and requiring third-party audits. Fines now required neighbor approval. Surveillance was banned. The community, once cold and fractured, held block parties and potlucks again. The barn? Now it hosted monthly forums for rural landowners across New Mexico, teaching them how to fight back against HOA overreach, legal harassment, and bullying by those in power. People came from all over. My mom, who'd flown in from Texas, stood at the fence one evening with a glass of sweet tea. "You always were stubborn," she said. "But you did good, son." I looked across the land, clean, free. This was never just about a mailbox. She nodded. No, it was about standing your ground. And I had, because when a tyrant picks the wrong person to push, they end up finding out just how strong a man becomes when he's got land, truth, and a whole town finally behind him.